believe in the ripple effect.
What's up? Another episode of Ripple Effect Podcast. Of course, I'm your host, Ricardo Rendes, also known as Ricky Varans, and a great episode for you today. Today, we have returning guest, somebody who's a regular on this show, a regular on the Union of the Unwanted, and actually one of the OGs on the Union of the Unwanted. She was one of the original regulars on that show, alongside people like Scott from the Rebunked podcast, the Grimerica guys, Monica from the Propaganda Report, and many others. And who I'm referring to is Maryam Henein, also known as the Bee Lady. And the reason they call her the Bee Lady is because of her amazing 2009 documentary called Vanishing of the Bees. But since then, and probably before then, she's been doing amazing journalistic work. She is a real investigative journalist, and she goes deep into topics. And much like myself, she doesn't mind diving deep into controversial topics. And that's exactly what she's done with her most recent investigation into the George Floyd story. And we go deep into this. She has a book that's coming out. She has a documentary that's coming out. And she has spent a lot of time investigating what really happened. And she's uncovered many of the unknown details and a lot of new information. So prepare for a conversation about issues, topics, and an event that we aren't supposed to have conversations about. And that's exactly what this show is about. It's about having the hard conversations, diving deep into things we're told to leave alone. And I think that's some of the value this show brings. And with that said, this is a value for value show. If you get some value out of these conversations, please consider giving some value back in return. And there's plenty of ways of doing it. You can go on rippleeffectpodcast.com and find all these links to all the things I'm going to mention on the website. And a couple of the ways you can support the show is PayPal. We have a PayPal account if you want to donate some money. We have a Patreon page if you want to support us monthly. And if you do once a month, I also do a Patreon podcast with my Patreon supporters. I have a merch store, and the merch store has just gotten way bigger. I have tons of new logos and merch now available. And the merch store has expanded as a company. So because of that, you can get stuff quicker. You have more options, and we have new products being uploaded all the time. So please keep up with the merch store. You can go to the Ripple Effect Podcast merch.com, and that will bring you directly to the merch store. Or like I said, you can find all the links on the Ripple Effect Podcast.com. I also have a crypto wallet if you want to send Bitcoin or Ethereum. I have links to my music on my website. And I believe the link is to iTunes, but you can find the music anywhere. You can stream it on any app that you can stream music. And also, last but not least, the University of Reason, created by my good friend Richard Grove. And you can find all these links in the show description or on my website. And if you're just curious, check out the University of Reason, the autonomy course. If you're at a crossroads in life, if you're looking to join a community, a liberty, freedom-based community that can help you take the next step in life, please check out the University of Reason. And that's about it, guys. Enjoy this conversation. I have another great and some would say controversial show right around the corner. So keep a lookout for that. And I will see you guys in the next one. Peace.
I believe in the ripple effect.
This is like never before seen footage. And I realized by doing that test run that really this comes alive if someone pays attention to what's called details, meaning that's where you really see the psyop. So are we recording? Yes, meaning.
Yeah, we can keep.
Yeah, so I feel like what I try to do is deconstruct this to really understand what was truth and what was lie. And also the fact that I've been covering this since May 25th, 2020. So we're almost at 2 years, and people don't know that the face of policing is changing because in due part of this case that the three, I don't know if you knew that the 3 officers just concluded their federal trial, and they were found guilty of basically not doing enough. So, and then there's another trial, a state trial that they're trying to televise, and stating that in order for justice to occur, we need to televise it to the people. That will be the state trial. So this is by no means over, even though people have George Floyd fatigue, right? There's so much happening in the world. Why do you want to pay attention to this? But if I position it at, this is the event that ushered in the color revolution. This is the event we were all fed up with the lockdowns, and they went from virus to violence, and they justified continuing the lockdowns and bringing in the mask mandates as they were bringing in this slogan of "I can't breathe." Like, is that just an accident that people are out there with their face diapers and chanting "I can't breathe"? So just to kind of set the stage for that, and then I can take you through some of the footage that's never been seen. I don't know if you want to say anything or have any questions.
Well, yeah. So real quick, I always, for people listening, and I think we might have discussed before, but why were you so intrigued with this story? Do you think it was just a neglected story, and that's why you went down that rabbit hole?
No, I normally wouldn't give a crap about this story. I think I was in the jungle with Zach, for he's the Google whistleblower. It was May 25th, Memorial Day. And he said, "Hey, Mimi, can you come and choke me?" And he's like, "I'm doing the George Floyd challenge." And I said, "Who's George Floyd?" It had just happened. So imagine even asking that question today. So what happened was, I've gone into the the coroner's office in Los Angeles, and I have a fascination with death. So I tentatively, I stepped on his neck, and he could still breathe. And so I said, well, if you really want to know how he died, we need to call the coroner's office. So now I'm calling the coroner's office. It was either May 25th or May 26th. And they told me directly, the report will take weeks and weeks and weeks, because real investigations take time. And then what happened was, I saw on CNN, they were seeding the narrative with the fact that this guy wasn't choked, to start sowing discord and riling up the people for their supposed peaceful protests / riots. So I caught them in a lie. And then the day after, I interviewed Giovanni Thunstrom, who's the other employer of George Floyd. And I noticed these talking points of, for instance, if you remember, there was liquid coming underneath the car, and I myself was like, oh my God, did he piss on himself? And later on to find out that's exhaust. So it was very clear to me, because I realize now that I work intuitively and by hunches, that these were talking points that were given. Oh, Derek worked outside, George worked inside. And so I felt like they were given sheets of paper with this public narrative. And in truth, also the police report says public narrative. And maybe that's something that they always do, say the public narrative versus what the truth. So to answer your question, it's kind of by accident. And then I kept on catching them one lie after the other. For instance, another thing is that Mercedes-Benz that does not belong to George Floyd. So when I went to look for the VIN records, and I see that they've scrubbed all the records to 2018. So I called the owner of the Mercedes-Benz back in 2018. I'm like, do you know that your car is infamous? And then I had caught the name of who the car belongs to. And I find her on Facebook. And I said to her, do you know that your car's records have been scrubbed? She said no. And by the way, I don't have my car and I won't have it till the trial is over. And we're talking about the trial that hasn't started, the state trial. So they've been holding on to her car. So it's basically finding one thing after the other, and then basically also being told, don't tap out on this story. Everybody's tapped out. I haven't tapped out. I covered the trial. I've written more than at least 30, 40 articles every day of the state trial, the federal trial. And so for the record, I feel like I'm going to cement the truth for anyone that gives a crap to have it out there. It's not like, you know, someone was like, do you want to know the truth about Breonna Taylor? I probably wouldn't care. But also with mysteries, having grown up reading Hardy Boys and Alfred Hitchcock, that I love whodunit stories and mysteries. And once you get into this, it's very curious what I've discovered.
I feel like that is one of the things that keeps us going sometimes, is uncovering the stuff that we aren't supposed to know, you know, and I think it's intriguing. I think all of us in the alternative media community, I think there is something sexy about it. There's something that's just like knowing what we aren't supposed to know is just, it keeps it, and every time you find something and you uncover it, it just makes you want to find out, what else have I been lied to? What else is a complete hoax? What else is a complete illusion? And you start uncovering thing after thing after thing until you get to probably the conclusion we've all gotten to, that just about everything could possibly, maybe not everything is a lie, but just about everything could possibly be a lie. And you know, never to dismiss anything.
Right.
Because, how many times do you have to uncover something before you realize, like, okay, well, there's nothing that's off limits in regards to what the truth is. So so for people listening who maybe around this time did tap out a little bit and maybe aren't too familiar with the official story, could you give like a brief description on what the media said basically happened?
Right. And the media narrative has changed. So for instance, this was billed as a racial crime, a crime of police brutality. But here in the federal trial that just finished, there was no talk of racism. They switched to the police brutality. Alexander Kang, a rookie, is Black. So we were told this was a horrific torture that was caught on camera thanks to Darnella Frazier, who was, I believe, 17 at the time, who is an award-winning Pulitzer. She's won a Pulitzer Prize for her journalism. I haven't. I'm barely making the surface, even though I've been around for 25 years, but she's raised at least $700,000 for her Black life. And this is the first time that a trial in Minneapolis was televised, live streamed, and that the people wanted justice, and that equated to 22 years of life. Now, the truth that George Floyd and Derek Chauvin worked at El Nuevo Rodeo, a club with ties to the Mexican cartel, the Sinaloa, is underplayed, erased, the fact that they knew each other. And I have purchased all the footage that I could get my hands on. So I just spent on a credit card $2,000 to obtain these exhibits, some of that have never been shown. And the little factoid that they worked at the same club was completely dismissed and rewritten over and positioned again as a race crime, a crime of police brutality, which it's not a race crime. And in the end, Keith Ellison, the very corrupt attorney general, went on 60 Minutes, a show that I used to be fond of, and now is like, oh, now I know it's a blatant lie because it's on 60 Minutes. Went on 60 Minutes after all was said and done and said that there was no evidence of this being a race crime. So it was a big FU to the people who, I have spoken to white people more so than Black people, but there's a lot of prominent Black people who are standing behind me that have said George Floyd can kiss their Black ass. But I've spoken to people that I guess would lean on the left, liberal, that have not wanted to speak to me anymore. Because, oh, if you think these guys shouldn't be in jail, then I don't want to speak to you. And they haven't done an iota of the research that I have done. I have applied for FOIA. I have interviewed Chris Martin, the boy that took the $20. I have interviewed all of the owners of Cup Foods. I have interviewed former lawyers for George Floyd. And I set out, just like with the bees, to become an expert. And so when I say I know more about this case than arguably anyone on this planet, I don't say that with arrogance. I say it with confidence, though, because I have spent more than 1,000 hours researching this story. So I hopefully that puts things in perspective. The amount of policing laws that have come into fruition to just completely revitalize the face of policing, just like the Rona was used to liquidate or distill or ruin some electoral laws. It's the Rona is like the is the Trojan horse. It's an excuse, and this is part and parcel, this George Floyd event, because we were getting antsy from being locked down, and then they continued because of the peaceful protests. So hopefully that gives some context.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the problem with any topic, is that it becomes so political, or it becomes so sensitive that people don't even want to look into it, or they don't want to talk to anybody who's going against the grain because they don't want to be labeled something. And the thing with me is, like, yeah, I mean, obviously this is a somewhat of a sensitive topic, because a lot of people believe it's race related. Some people believe it isn't. But either way, like, they should still want to hear what you have to say and then come to the conclusion after seeing all the evidence. And I'm sure, like, I mean, I've known you for quite a while. We've done many shows and interviews together. You don't come off as a racist at all. So I'm assuming your motives isn't to, like, your motives weren't like, hey, this is a race-related death, but I'm going to try to debunk it because I don't want people to say. It's like, that wasn't your motives at all. You saw lies, and then you're like, okay, there's some more here. Where there's smoke, there is fire.
Yeah.
You also, I love that line. It went from the virus to violence, because it's you're absolutely right. Like, they just transitioned so smoothly into like, controlling the masses in one way, and then they control the masses with and the divide and conquer technique with, first it was masks and vaccines and all that stuff, and then it was race and all that. So it was like same playbook, and you're seeing through the lies. So it's like, if the evidence tells you one thing, why, I don't understand why anybody would want to deny it just because it's a sensitive topic, or because to me it's no topic is off basis to discuss. And if somebody has, if somebody's saying something that goes completely against my worldview, those are people I want to talk to. Those are people I want to pick at their brain and be like, okay, how'd you come to that conclusion? And it's, what do you know that I don't know? Because I want to learn, and I want to learn more about the situation. So
absolutely.
How would you want to start? Do you want to get into?
I want to say one more thing. Yeah, just to say, I as a journalist, a real journalist, I'm like, why are they lying? For what purpose are they lying? Nothing to do with race. And then when Keith Ellison, who sat purposely on the body-worn camera, when I saw that footage, and I was like, oh, that's a grown man, a 46-year-old? What is he whining like a little sissy bitch? Like, could I imagine be doing that? Like, at one point he's on the floor, he goes, I need water. Oh, I joke. I'm like, would you like a menu, George? Would you like to order some food? Could you imagine being, I need some water, if you're resisting for 10 minutes? That wouldn't fly. And so I want to also say, I found a paper yesterday on the NIH, because my thesis is that Black Lives Matter, because they know they're the numero uno vaccine hesitant. From the get-go, they've been very aware. So how do we go after the Black lives because they matter? How do we how do we cultivate some confidence? Oh, look, the government for once is doing the right thing. This was sold as we're going to go, you're doing a good thing, George. We're going to make you Rodney King 2.0 if he knew about it. You're going to say, I can't breathe. Keep saying it, because they knew at one point he's going to keep saying it and it's going to become real because someone gave him bad drugs. Maurice Lester Hall, the convicted felon drug dealer who sold him bad drugs before, and to realize that a year to almost to the day in May 2019, George gets arrested. He does the same song and dance. This time he's consuming OxyContin, also made by the Mexican cartel, ends up almost with an overdose again. It's almost like, that thing that you did last year, do that again. Say, I can't breathe. And then at one point it becomes real, but it's like the boy who cried wolf. And maybe Derek didn't know that the guy was going to die. And maybe that's why he showed up at the hospital that most people don't know. So I can start with one clip that is almost 4 minutes long, if you're okay with it. I narrate it, and it's a color version of Cup Foods starting at 7:34 inside Cup Foods, which I've sped up, if that's okay with you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so
yeah, I made you co-host, so you should.
Yes, I see that. I see it. You can see?
Yep, I see everything clearly. Yep.
Okay, the only thing is that hold on, hopefully the volume, because my computer is not the best.
If it's low on my end, I can put it up a little bit.
Okay, all right, so we're in Cup Foods, 7:34, so we know that George Floyd has been in this convenience store for at least 10 minutes.
This is Cup Foods, May 25th. Have a look at George Floyd. Have you seen this in color? Take note that Maurice Lester Hall, a convicted felon who had an outstanding warrant for his arrest and skipped town, is with him. Money, what is he doing? Who is he talking to? Let's pass by him again. Really there for about 10 minutes at least, loitering or scheming for something. So according to one of the owners of Cup Foods, Maurice Lester Hall tried to buy an iPad that day worth $180 with fake cash. That's petty theft, but nobody called the police on Ricky Workford, which is the name that he gave our police officer, Peter Chan. So Maurice just grabbed some money from George. Maurice Lester Hall, maybe George Floyd's murder, because anyone who's paying attention knows that this guy died because of a fentanyl overdose, and maybe possibly something else. And those drugs came from the Mexican cartel, the Sinaloa, to be specific, with ingredients made in China. Fentanyl is the #1 killer of Americans, even outweighing the bolstered Rona regime numbers. Investigations take time, and investigations ask the proper questions. In March 2020, George ended up in the hospital at least 2 times for a near overdose. George had purchased drugs from Maurice in the past, and then possibly some drugs that Maurice gave him that day. Shawanda Hill is also a convicted felon. She was charged for prostitution. Oh, who is he talking to over there? Shawanda's arguably fixing her phone. In May of 2019, in nearly similar fashion, George was arrested, and he also gobbled some drugs. This time, they were OxyContin, also made by the Mexican cartel. Maurice is gonna take out a big ass wad of cash and gonna be counting. Some of that cash is fake. If anybody really gave a shit about this man's black life, we would be asking where the drugs come from. Where does that big money come from? Here, George Floyd's doing a little dance.
He definitely seems messed up on something.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
I mean, he does not seem normal.
No.
He's gonna go around. This is Chris Martin. Chris Martin's gonna hold the $20 bill up.
This is crazy that you got this footage.
He
Yeah.
said he wished that they put it on his tab,
It's almost done.
but they didn't.
So I'll just stop.
What did you learn from that? Like what caught your eye initially?
The money, all the money. And for whatever reason, there's the owner of Cup Foods that was the face of Cup Foods, that basically they hired a BLM liaison to not get their shop burnt down. And for whatever reason, this one brother told me, we got caught up. This is like a black-white thing. And told me Maurice is a snitch. Maurice is a drug dealer. And so there's a cover up I've discovered that I'm leaving for the book and the documentary, but someone inside Cup Foods. And so I don't know if they planted it or there's also in Freemasons, sorry, I'm jumping around. In Freemasons, there's definitely Masonic symbols, and I've read so many books from money laundering to Freemasons that they also have a cornerstone ritual, a drama ritual that is self-sacrifice, that possibly he had no choice, George, and was told, again, may not have known that he was going to be killed. But there is a possibility that he did a self-sacrifice and knew, long live George Floyd, like Maurice says. So the thing that stuck out mostly is, what the fuck are they doing for 10 minutes in there? What, like moving around? I see the X on the ground. I don't know if you noticed that.
I did.
But I've been on sets as a extra, as a PA when I lived in LA a long time ago. At first, so I was like, is that 6 feet apart? They hadn't yet started. There is another X closer to, so it could be 6 feet apart, but it also seemed like X marked the spot for action. There's another little segment that I can show you that it seems like Tu Tao, the Asian officer, signals to the bystanders, all of them that ended up as witnesses come trial time, that it's almost like he used his hand to say action, and then they all move. So basically, if you, let's say me and you walk into a convenience store and you use fake money and the person at the counter says no, and then 10 minutes later, I come and you're beside me, and now I'm trying to use money, but this time they allowed it. So why did they not call the police on Maurice Lester Hall?
I mean, I guess to be a devil's advocate, what if he he said, oh, I didn't know it was fake money. I'll go get some real money. My apologies, something like that.
Okay. Well, with that said, they sent kids out twice to go fetch. It's May 25th. It's a Memorial Day. They're supposedly going to a barbecue. The person who owns the car told me she lied. I caught her in a lie because I said, do you know Maurice? I think he set George up. And then I said, did you lend George the car? And she goes, I lent them the car. We was supposed to be having a barbecue that day. And then I remembered, oh, honey, you worked at Salvation Army. That's how you know Maurice and how you know George, because you guys all worked at the Salvation Army. So he was supposed to go buy stuff for barbecue, but he leaves with a banana and charcoal and banana and smokes that he arguably doesn't smoke. So to your respect, when the boys went out twice, wouldn't you be like, here, dude, here's a real 20. It's Memorial Day. F off. Leave us alone. Or the second time, why don't they leave? Why do they just stay there when it's very likely that the cops are going to come because they're telling them that they're not going to give a 20, or here are the cigarettes back? Now, remember, like, the policy at Cup Foods is to ban the person for 2 years. It's not to call the cops. And in fact, when it comes to fake cash, it's the Secret Service. So I applied for a FOIA report to see what's the deal with the money. They only mentioned there's money that was found in the car that was shoved in between the seats. They only mention a 20 that was exchanged here. And Maurice, when you go outside, Maurice takes the 20 and throws it on the ground. When the boys go to recuperate or try to recuperate their 20 or their smokes, George Floyd is supposedly taking a little snooze because he supposedly swallowed Percocet. And Maurice is the one that does all the communicating with the boys. So to answer, that supposition of playing devil's advocate, because I'm all for playing devil's advocate, that doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense that they didn't leave. It doesn't make sense that they didn't just say, here's a real 20, just leave us alone.
Yeah, interesting. Things are
so I find, Ricky, that the only way to really see is like when we actually look at details, and we also look at another thing is, let's say there's someone who's passed away. What is the body identification process? All right. So the George Floyd is announced dead at 9:25. Medical examiner Andrew Baker does a autopsy, starts slicing into him at 9:25 in the morning. But somehow overnight, who identified the body, and how did they get Benjamin Crump on the case so quickly that at 11, he's already doing exclusive on TMZ? That's just not the way in which things move when you haven't even finished doing your autopsy. Now, I know that they took FBI prints, and so they found out this guy's a crook. And who did you would need to identify, tell the next of kin. So the child, there's supposedly a daughter or a sibling. So I don't know in how quickly they retained Benjamin Crump, who, if you watch Joel Gilbert, who helped consult with me and helped me deep in the rabbit hole, and I watched that movie, The Trayvon Martin Hoax, as part of my copious research, that without a shadow of a doubt, Benjamin Crump commits witness fraud, puts his star witness as a completely different person. And then that means the parents know, that means the defense knows, that means possibly the prosecution. And then they double down on their lies, and then they take this fake witness and she does all the talk show. So if I were to look at how Benjamin Crump has co-opted a story in the past and without a shadow of doubt committed witness fraud, I don't put anything past this guy. He's not a civil rights lawyer. He's an ambulance chasing shyster.
Now, you brought up Freemasons. Is that because you also tend to believe, I know I've heard other people say that he was in the Freemasons or linked to the Freemasons of some way, George was?
Well, he does have a big ass ego. Benjamin Crump is part of the Boule. That you can prove. I cannot prove that George Floyd was a Boule. I do know that where I am now, we went to look at the Masonic Lodge, and it just coincidence, there was a person passing by who was a 33rd level Freemason. So I'm asking him questions, acting all naive and dumb. And I said, so do you have to, like, how do you get in? Would you ever accept someone who's a druggie? And he goes, in fact, I'm a recovered druggie. So him and his wife were drug addicts. And he said, you don't have to believe in God. You just have to believe in something greater than yourself. And then I said, oh, so can you believe in Satan? And he goes, oh, don't believe that. So it's very possible. I don't know Salvation Army. I think they also have programs to recuperate, to rehabilitate. So I'm not sure if he was a boule. The building that burnt down, the El Nuevo, is one of the addresses on Lake Street was 3303. It's a Masonic building from 1808 that burnt down. There's 33s all over this story. There's the theme of the twins, because Stephen Jackson was his twin. We're in the Twin Cities. This happens in the month of Gemini, is also the twins. So when I at first it's like, what's with all the 33s? That's not true. This 33s is plastered all over this story. And so when I read about this cornerstone ritual, and I'm still doing research into the Freemasons, it's possible. It's possible that they committed, this was a ritual. I mean, it sounds so fantastical that, but there's like, it's squad 330. The riots start on 33rd Street. It's and I can go on. It's not it. There's more. So that's why I think that there's a link. And I do think, oh, also I'll show you this. This is a short. Sick. Can you see?
I cannot, not yet. There we go.
Okay. So this is a clip. This is Maya. So Maya Santa Maria is the front woman for El Nuevo. I'll play this clip. This was taken in very early June. Oh, maybe this is not. Oh no, it didn't. I realized that it didn't capture the. Okay, I thought that this was a clip, but it's not, so I have to fix that. But in this, I'll show you something else. But in this clip, Maya Santa Maria in Spanish says he was a sacrificio. And then she corrects herself and she inserts the word literal sacrifice. She actually says this was a literal sacrifice.
And so, who is she?
Maya Santa Maria is the front woman to the El Nuevo Rodeo, who is owns Telemundo and basically has a big influence in the Spanish, the Latino narrative. She's the front woman. She's not the actual owner, although not many people know that. And when I was speaking to one of the owners, the one I befriended in Cup Foods that told me a whole bunch of stuff, like that Maurice tried to buy an iPad, I said, so what do you think about Maya? And he goes, oh, that witch? And I laughed and I'm like, why are you calling her a witch? So it turns out Nabil has, this owner has been in jail. When he was in jail, it just so happened that he was in jail at the same time as Maya's now ex-husband, she set him up, so he says, and they shot the shit. And I said, so is she part of the Mexican cartel? And his answer was, she is the Mexican cartel. So this is 9:05 on May 25th, as all racist cops who've committed police brutality, they show up at the jail, at the hospital. It usually takes about 20 minutes is the average time to resuscitate someone. For whatever reason, they spent an hour to try to resuscitate George. And if they really cared to resuscitate him, what happened was that they did a load and go. They put him on the gurney, and then they went actually the wrong way. I'll show you. So this is Cup Foods. This is where they went to stop to try to resuscitate him. And it's a 13-minute drive to the hospital. And when I interviewed Chris Martin, he said to me that George was dead when they put him on the gurney. And if they really cared to resuscitate him, they would have done it at the location. So on one hand, they actually say that the bystanders were more helpful than the cops. But on the other hand, they have to admit that they were rowdy and that they had to move away from them. So it doesn't make sense that they went all the way here and then performed. They put the striker machine, and then now this is at the hospital, and now it's like almost 9, and they're still trying to resuscitate him. And I had never seen this shot, which is arguably at the hospital, no longer on the road. Try to show you, see what else I can show you. This is because some people are like, Maryam, he's not really dead. And I think that he is really dead. Of course, there's movie magic, but people said, oh, there's, his legs are cut off or whatnot. I think that he's dead based on I don't know if you've ever saw the footage of him with Thomas Lane in the ambulance.
No, I haven't. So just to clarify,
Yes.
you think that he died because they obviously wanted him to die, so and then they could basically spark this race war and all this uproar in regards to this death, right?
Yes, but perhaps Derek and George are owned by the Mexican cartel, and once you start realizing the impact or the influence of the Mexican cartel, who arguably the government uses an excuse, but they're in bed with them and in charge, that I lost my train of thought, that how prevalent, and that someone told me, Maryam, you need protection. And have you ever seen the Sinaloa deface someone? And I've been looking for protection. I finally found a publisher. I'm looking for an executive producer to help me with the documentary, which is a very simple concept of putting things in chronological order and allowing the audience member to see what happened from 7:30 to around 9:30, when he's pronounced dead. So I think, did I answer your question?
Yeah. It was just because I was getting the hunch that people who are saying he's alive, you're assuming that that's not the case, obviously because of the evidence, but also because it wouldn't be a part of the agenda. It wouldn't work to their advantage in regards to him being alive. You would want him to die so that you could spark the uproar, and that sparked everything else that came with it, that the divide and conquer that was going on
Right.
in the country. And it was obvious that they didn't want people to come together. They wanted us to go apart and dislike each other and pretend and convince us that our neighbors were the enemies and people in our community was the enemy and not them. And that's typically how it works most of the time. It's like we get our focus on the person that we think we disagree with that's in the community, instead of our focus being on the elite that don't really give a shit what skin color we are, or what religion we are, or whatever. They're all working together anyways. So yeah. Is there any other?
Yes. I also want to say that maybe Derek didn't know either that the guy was going to die, because I would argue, if you care, I'm not for police brutality, and I know there's police brutality, but was this guy activated? Was Derek activated because he also worked, he worked at another Mexican club as an off-duty officer. Nobody knows that. There was also $90,000 of unaccounted money, because this was a money laundering operation that conveniently, like, imagine you don't have any of your legitimate storefronts because everything is shut down and you're not running an essential business. So shit, you can't clean your money. What are you gonna do? Let's just burn it all. Let's burn everything on Lake Street. Let's burn the evidence room. Let's burn the club down. And that's very convenient. So I did find the clip of Maya Santa Maria. So we'll just play it here.
Pero debemos de cerrar esta herida tan profunda que tiene Estados Unidos en cuanto al racismo, ¿no? Algo dijeron que se me hizo muy sábio. Fue un sacrificio, literalmente un sacrificio, para ver si ahora sí puede haber un cambio en lo que es la brutalidad de los policías.
So anyway, I don't know how many boys and girls at home, if I can say boys and girls, speak Spanish, but she says it's a literal sacrificio. And I just want to say one more thing, share that a 911 call, the 911 call that was placed, the cover up that I've discovered is surrounding that 911 call. At the trial, they released the 911 call of Genevieve, who was a firefighter that was conveniently walking that day, and Donald Williams, who said that he had trained at the academy and had ties to BLM and was very vocal in saying that he was choked. So those calls were released in the trial. So I'm like, okay, well, where's the actual 911 call? It turns out there's a statute in Minnesota that the person who releases the call, they have to sign off. So whatever reason they didn't. I spent time trying to figure out who is it that made the call. And I figured out who it was that made the call by also listening or reading the transcription. I was like, okay, this is a young kid. He doesn't speak English. And at one point, it's almost like Cyrano de Bergerac, someone is telling him what to say. And I could infer that all by reading the transcript. So for whatever reason, they hid that. But I'm bringing this up. They go twice to try to recuperate the 20 or the cigarettes. And then at around 8:01, they place a call. It's about 2.5 minutes, maybe 3 minutes. The average time that it takes for the cops to show up is between 7 and 11. Well, these rookie cops showed up in less than 4 minutes on the scene. So again, that is a little bit, to me, bizarro.
Yeah, that is. I mean, so I've also seen videos on BitChute and some of the other video platforms about how some people, the person who was recording the famous footage, how other angles look like they're not there, and how that could be, completely manipulated and lied to or lied about. So it sounds obviously like they lied initially. I mean, initially they said they didn't know each other. Then it came out that they did know each other, the cop and George, and they worked together at a club. And then there's also some rumors about George being doing porn. Have you ever heard?
Not a rumor. And everything that I say, I can prove. So until I saw the porn, I saw him with Kimberly, whatever her name is. I didn't stay around because everyone's like, does he have a big dick? I didn't wait for that. I just was like, okay, there's porn. I've downloaded it. I have it on my computer. He knows how to play act. So yes, he was, and also I'm bringing this up. Maurice is clad in red. That is Blood's territory. The Bloods do work with the Mexican cartel. That's how they keep it decentralized in this day and age, that they have different beats. And George Floyd was a career criminal and a drug addict that was boosting. So he was selling enough to be able to keep his addiction alive. And possibly everything was shut down. I'm a 3-time felon. I need money. I'm gonna snitch. I'm gonna come out. No, George, you can't. And then say, okay, we're gonna do this event, and you're gonna help raise the vaccine levels. We're gonna make you Rodney 2.0. They know either he's partially aware of what's going on, or not. But I don't think that he knew he was going to die. And I don't think that Derek knew he was going to die. And I thought to myself, how because I've watched the footage so many times, and I really look for things people don't look for. What is the moment when they see each other? How is it that they could not recognize? I do not buy that this cop worked there for 17 years and doesn't recognize a 6'6", 240-pound dude. Maybe George was out of, high out of his mind and didn't recognize Derek. But I thought to myself, the only way is if they're told not to recognize one another. Now, after interviewing Kathy O'Brien, an MK Ultra survivor, she says that it's possible that Derek was activated. I can tell you that Derek, at age 18, he graduated as a cook, by the way. That's his degree as a cook. And then he gets sent to Germany to military police. I'm not sure what he did in the military police in Germany. And I don't know enough until I interview Kathy further about MK Ultra and being able to play a sound or put someone in a trance.
Yeah, that's interesting. So do you think, so he's like a Oswald almost, like he could be involved, but he doesn't understand the extent he's involved in, or the whole, because Oswald, obviously was linked to the CIA. He went to Russia or the Soviet Union. Like he has all these links to mobsters, all this stuff. But he openly said when they were filming him, when he got arrested, like he said, "I'm a patsy." He didn't. So it's one of those things where like he probably was involved, but he didn't know about the event, and he didn't know. So could George be? Do you think he was more unknowingly involved? Like he didn't know about the whole thing. Like you said, he was sold this idea of you're gonna. You're doing this great and noble thing, and then did it just go wrong? Did it go bad? Or
I think so. I think that it went wrong. I want to share also that day, Maurice Lester Hall skips town. He hitches, so he says, back to Houston, and he's caught as a fugitive out of state on June 2nd. On June 3rd, the case is sealed and he's released, and he's found to have the early beginnings. I never heard of this before. The early beginnings of intellectual disability, aka mental illness. But guess what, Ricky? The next day, he's doing Good Morning Fucking America, as all mentally disabled crooks do, right? Like, isn't that a little bit bizarre? And so I say that because this guy pled the fifth. He sold him the drugs, or he gave him the drugs. He's an accomplice to his murder, if George was murdered. And he's a free man. And then the day of the verdict, when at the scene, I believe it's Kang says, Kang or Lane says, how do you spell George? I don't know how to spell George. Okay, you don't know how to spell George. Now, Law and Crime Network has an exclusive with Maurice Lester Hall, and says, so what are you going to be doing? I'm going to be involved in some book writing. Oh, that's nice. You don't know how to fucking spell George, but you're going to have a book deal now. That's great. It's like, it's so corrupt. We are glorifying crooks while we're imprisoning God-loving people. I know, because I organized a prison protest for Mark Grenon at the Genesis Church that got caught up in Operation Quack Hack, the same operation they came after me for, the FDA, FTC, and DOJ, and they have not even had a fair trial yet. And yet this guy, Maurice Lester Hall, who's a convicted felon, and the irony is, a year before, on May 25th, he's caught choking his baby mama. So he's the one who's been caught choking someone, and he's roaming free, has a new lease on life, and is writing a book. What the fuck? Excuse my language.
so this sounds like there's so many layers to it,
right? That's why it's called, my book is called George Floyd, a multi-layered psyop examined. I mean, I'm going to show you, if I can show you my book cover, because, Ricky, I raised $1 million to make Vanishing of the Bees. It's an award-winning film, and I need help to raise $15,000. This is my book cover. a multi-layered psyop examined. To see if there's anything else. There's one more thing I want to show you. Here, these are little things that, can you see this trash can, which has 666 on it, by the way, was near the phone booth, near the bus. When they moved it, and there's a big space on the ground, and they moved it nearer to the bus. I don't know, did they move that as part of this event? Who knows? And also, I own George Floyd's debt. George Floyd owes me $20, not Cup Foods. I sent $20 to one of the owners of the Cup Foods. And because my logic was that I wanted to look into his social security number to see if it was real. And Joel Gilbert, who's the director of Trayvon Martin, he said that would be pretty cool just for the book that you own George Floyd's debt. And I do.
That is hilarious. That is so funny. So do you think, so who do you think was behind the hoax, the psyop? Do you think it was the government trying to keep us basically irate and keeping the chaos going, or maybe possibly just creating more chaos?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. This investigation that it's taken 2 years is still underway. I don't have all the answers. That's the beauty of a psyop. Do I know that Tim Walz and Jacob Fry, the Trudeau knockoff, and others are corrupt, that Jacob Fry has been implicated in money laundering operation? Do I think that they're working with the Mexican cartel? Do I think the police is very crooked in the MPD? Yes, I do. And how these false flags work, I interviewed Ed Chiarini, who I've done the interview, people can see it, and he's considered a false flag expert, but around school shootings. And they leaked a Homeland Security X-plan. And the argument is that these are all exercises. When I covered this federal trial, when they go granular, so imagine you get caught up, you're their fourth day on the job as a cop, and something's happening in 0 time, and now we're gonna dissect it, and we're not gonna even consider that they all thought he was on drugs or the 10 minutes of him resisting, and now we're gonna ruin your life, Ricky. And we're going to paint you as some racist person, police brutality. I think this is all a drill. I think that they use these false flags to justify all the changes, and people are not paying attention. They don't know that. I'll read you one more thing. They say this in a court document that they just dropped yesterday on this trial. 1 second. This is a court document that just came out. The upcoming trial, we're talking about the state trial that's coming up in June, in this case, promises to be equally historic, if not for different reasons. This would be the first time the state has obtained aid and abet convictions against on-duty officers, not just for what they did, but also for what they did not do, i.e. for failing in their capacities as law enforcement officers to intervene and stop the criminal conduct of a fellow officer. For that reason, many believe the prosecutions here, which haven't occurred yet, even before a verdict, mark a pivotal moment in American policing. And this is what it's all about, changing the face of policing, where we are relying on cameras in this Minority Police Report future to determine justice. And the drugs, by the way, it's like abracadabra. They're not even a top line consideration. Would George Floyd have died if he had not those drugs in his system? I would argue no. I would argue that Derek Chauvin is also a scapegoat and is being thrown under the bus. Is he an actor? Are these officers really going to have their lives ruined? I don't know completely what's real and what's not. I just know there's a hell of a lot of holes that I've tried my best to. I mean, I think, people who are watching can be like, oh, this chick's done a shitload of research. Really asking all the questions possible, every question under the sun, really look under the rocks and try to get an answer for it, to be able to lay this out and explain to the people what really happened and how they do their abracadabra magic tricks.
Well, George and the police officer, I mean, like I said before, like a lot of times you can pick out the lies initially or quickly because they were saying they didn't know each other. I mean, they were trying to basically really simplify the whole story. And so people didn't look into it. It's like, oh, this was a perfect and very simple example of a racist cop giving a black man a hard time. And then you come to find out like they actually knew each other. Apparently they didn't get along, right? Wasn't that another thing too?
Yes.
That they would butt heads a lot at work at the
That's the story. David Pinney, a black man, was interviewed by CBS, and there was a 15-minute interview. A day after, he recants, and I tried to license that interview, but because it hasn't been aired, I'm not allowed to license it as a journalist. I'll tell you this as well. The federal trial, I wasn't there, and it wasn't live streamed. So my logic was, I'm going to get pool reports from 5-6 different journalists, and based on my context that I have and how detail oriented I am, I'm going to just read all the notes. And so one day I called an NBC reporter and I said, I have a couple questions. And he said, I can answer your clarifying questions, but my boss told me that I'm not allowed to speak to journalists. Oh, that's interesting. And so there was and this is, for me, I really think that it was an exercise drill. They were talking a lot about ketamine. And I was like, why the hell are they talking about ketamine? There was no ketamine administered. So the reporter told me, oh, there was a scandal in Minneapolis where officers were administering to arrestees ketamine to sedate them. And one guy, for instance, died. I don't know who cares about his black life, but that's why the ketamine. And so again, looking at what was on trial was the Minneapolis Police Training Manual. That was really on trial. And by proxy, we're going to punish these guys because first and foremost, there is this hierarchical police system that you have to obey, or you call your field training officer, your FTO, in this case, Derek Chauvin, you call him sir, you submit to him. So they're saying that these guys are guilty. They should have just shoved Derek out of the way, even though Thomas Lane literally did compressions on George Floyd's chest. Tou Thao ups the call to code 3. Alexander Kang asks to take his pulse, and they all suspected excited delirium, which is in the manual, which they have a PowerPoint presentation. So if you're all operating under the assumption this guy's on drugs, but then in the trial, you're not even considering the state of mind or the fact that this guy lied. He said, Thomas Lane goes, are you on something? You're acting kind of squirrely. And he says, no, officer. So this guy lied. We're not taking that into consideration. And again, anyone watching, you try to get away with that and see what happens. Good luck.
So the him putting his knee on him and
Yeah.
Was that protocol? Was that how he was supposed to handle it as a police officer?
So that is, there is a statute that I name in one of my articles that if there's active resisting, what they failed to do is put him in the prone position. And what I don't understand, and this is by no means, am I justifying George Floyd's death? Am I justifying continuing to put his knee after George Floyd is clearly passed out, right? But he has one, his other leg is on the floor, so not all the weight is there. There's camera perspective bias that his knee was kind of along the shoulder blade area, wasn't on the neck the whole time. And it was that week, there's a meme of showing an officer with their knee on the neck in other parts of the world. So that is up for debate. They didn't put him on the side, so that is a fail. And Derek has his hand in his pocket, and kneeling also is a act in the Freemasons of kneeling, also the hand in the pocket. So you could argue that, but of course that's kind of a flimsy. And I honestly don't know why he continued to put his knee on the neck. He looked straight at the camera at Darnella, and it seems weird. But if you listen to him after, there's one footage that I saw, he's with his wife, his then wife. I don't know if she's still his wife, even though they say they divorced, that he's very soft-spoken. He's 5'9". You could see from the milestone camera at one point, these are 4 guys, and the whole car is moving, because that's how strong George Floyd is. And you do become super strong if excited delirium is happening. It just so happened that I caught someone in Florida. I was with Zach. We were at an event, and some chick was experiencing excited delirium. She took off her clothes, her tits were out. She was super strong. They had to restrain her. I don't know what she was on, but excited delirium is true, although it's controversial. But I think that's the premise. They all thought, I'll show you one more thing, if that's okay, of Derek.
Yeah. If she was naked, maybe they were pretending to restrain her and they weren't really restraining.
No, she wasn't naked when we started watching her.
I'm kidding.
She took off her clothes and she was acting super cuckoo.
Well, even on drugs, I mean, if you're on
Right.
cocaine, you're a little, I mean, because adrenaline, I mean, all the natural energy chemicals that your body can release, in a state of being high on cocaine or whatever.
Right.
And I know people who smoke weed and go to the gym and they say they get their best workouts when they're high. So
Really?
who
They
knows?
don't get tired?
No, I mean, I don't smoke weed, but apparently it has different
Well, I would think they're smoking indica. I mean, sativa.
sativa, yeah.
So I wouldn't smoke weed and go to the gym. Okay, this is after the event. Charles McMillan was one of the bystanders, and hopefully you can hear this.
This is after the
Yeah.
That I've pasted together. They're both interactions between Charles McMillan and Derek Chauvin. Charles is a black man with white glasses who was a bystander who testified at the state trial. And in the first clip, there's an acknowledgement that Charles and Derek know one another. Derek, unbeknownst to most, is known as the warlord of Precinct 3. The warlord of Precinct 3. In the second clip, only part of it was shown in the state trial. The part where Derek says he's a sizable guy.
This week's gonna control this guy because he's a sizable guy. Yeah, that guy, get in the car. He's like, calm down something.
The court failed to mention that Derek says they thought he was on drugs, that George Floyd was on drugs.
You want something right now?
So he was known as the warlord of Precinct 3, a police activist, someone who is legit, covers police brutality for 40 years, told me that. Also, when I said the irony, Derek wasn't supposed to be at work that day. They were about to have lunch, so he showed up for work. Somehow he got called into work. They were having lunch at 8 o'clock at night, and the dispatch is called, but then the dispatch is canceled. And Tu Tao, the Asian officer, says, let's go because those guys are rookies and they're in gangland. One, I didn't know that a cop, I don't have clarity on how a cop can decide on his own that they're going to show up to a scene. That they decided even though it was called off. And so when I told this woman, this activist, they said they were going to gangland, she laughed and she goes, anybody who knows anything knows that the MPD works with the Bloods. So in fact, at one point they put, when the protests, riots erupted, they put this proxy group that are reformed Bloods to help police the streets. And there was the people, the community was disgruntled because they said that these supposed people who are there for the people are really aligned with the cops. And I can tell you that Minneapolis, one longtime Black Panther OG lives in Minneapolis, calls it Mordor, and that it's very corrupt. It's a very corrupt place, and there is a lot of police brutality, a lot of police corruption. I found in which will be in my book, 2 pages of officers who've been who've had to be fired for an array of things, from drug dealing to prostitution. The cop was prostituting himself. So there's no question that there's police brutality. There's no question there's racism. So in a sacrifice, they kind of, okay, we're going to throw Derek and these officers under the bus, and somehow it's going to legitimize or make good all the cases of true police brutality and racism. And I just don't think that it does. I think it does a disservice. Homicides have doubled in Minneapolis since the incident. So
there's a documentary I ran into a while ago called What Happened in Vegas, and initially I thought it was about specifically the Vegas shooting, and that's why I was intrigued with it, but it actually revolves more around the police department in Vegas and like just the history of corruption and conspiracies, and then it also does hit on the Vegas shooting a little bit, but it paints the picture of how like you can't believe what they're saying or if they were involved, and how like basically don't believe anything that happens in Vegas happens the way they're telling you. You know, I know it almost sounds like I'm saying whatever happens in Vegas stays in Vegas, but apparently with the police officers, that's also the case, that you know there's a lot of corruption there. And then of course that other documentary, though it was on Netflix a while ago, the 4-5, right? It was about that really corrupt New York police officers that were like selling drugs. And
what's it called? I haven't seen that.
Yeah, it's called the 4-5. I think that's let me see. I'll look it up just to make sure.
The 4 FOUR?
Yeah, because I think that was 4-5. Let me doc.
Yeah.
The 7-5. Sorry, wrong number.
7-5.
The 7-5. Yeah, if you look it up, it was I mean, it was wild when you see what some of these police officers were doing and getting away with. It was just like, I mean, the guy who's the main character in the film, he's done some interviews since. I believe he's done some time or whatever, but he was considered one of the most corrupt police officers in the US. I mean, just the stuff that he was doing, and he's pretty honest about it too. He's done some interviews. I believe he was even on the Rogan podcast.
Wow.
Eventually. Right. But so yeah, I mean, this stuff happens. I mean, there is issues with police officers. There is issue with racism and discrimination. I mean, that stuff happens. But you know, the problem with this specific type of events is that people pick a team. And so it's like you either decide that every time there's a police shooting, it's the cop's fault, or every time there's a police shooting, it's not the cop's fault. And it's like, well, how about we dissect every situation? Real, like there's going to be examples where you're like, you know what, the police officer could have handled that better. And there's going to be examples where it's like, you know what, his actions were justified, and so there's racist people and cops people. So like a racist cop, if he didn't choose a career in being a police officer, he could be working at Dunkin' Donuts or wherever. Like there's people who are and there's racism everywhere. There are black people who don't like white people don't like black people, Asians who don't like Europeans who don't like Asians. There's discrimination everywhere. And so to kind of just have this very simplistic view on the world where it's like it's always the police's fault, and it's regardless how the events happen, it's just silly, and it ends up the same way that one black person shouldn't and doesn't represent all black people. So if you find one shithead black person, he shouldn't represent everybody who looks like him or is of the same race. One police officer who's a shithead shouldn't and doesn't represent all police officers. And so it's the same type of logic, but yet they don't see the flaw in their logic, that it's like, okay, hey, racism is bad because one bad black person doesn't represent all, but by the way, this bad cop represents all the police officers. And it's and I do understand that there are some, like, so they believe there's some inherent racism in the system. When you look at like the cocaine and the crack laws, that was an example of how you would get way more time for crack than you would cocaine, mostly because who was doing cocaine? Attorneys, politicians, the rich people, and then crack was a poor man's drug. So I could there are some examples of it, but to go to that extreme. And the other thing too is some people have good intentions and they don't realize they're being used as a pawn in a bigger game. And I think that happens a lot too.
Absolutely. Yes. These are very excellent points. What's the solution? Discernment. I'm about details, and I don't believe damning these officers does justice to the real true cases. And in fact, when they won their civil suit, Benjamin Crump announced that during the week of the jury selection, and it was disruptive and it seemed like a ploy. There were people, if you watch the presser, there were real people in the audience who are like, am I going to see any of that $27 million? Hell no, you're not. This is a Ponzi scheme. That's another characteristics of a false flag, that the supposed victims raise shitloads of money. When I interviewed Chris Martin, who I could tell was genuine, he didn't bulk and any of my, I didn't record him. He didn't shy away from any of my questions. And then I said, how about your Black life, Chris? Did you think, why is this girl raising $700,000? How about you? How long is it going to take for you to process this? You know how hella guilty this kid feels? He wished that he would have put it on a tab. And what was interesting, I asked him, I was just curious. So when you went to court, I said, did they have to shove a PCR test up your nose? And he said no. And he goes, and then he volunteered and he goes, I'm not going to take the vaccine. And I said, oh, this was last year. I said, oh, why? He goes, it's a little too New World Order for me. And so this kid is privy to that there's a New World Order, but he's too young to imagine that this would be orchestrated. I'm going to trust that when he said George Floyd was dead, when they put him on the gurney, I'm going to trust that he would know, anyone would know when a spirit has been snuffed from a body. And nobody cared about his Black life. He's going to be processing this for the rest of his life. But unfortunately, he's too naive and has been a victim of real racism that he wouldn't be able to understand the level of orchestration beyond and below. But I could tell you that he's like, damn, he didn't know half of the things that I had found out, and he's at the scene. He's like, you've gone deep. So he wasn't privy to all the details, and they also compartmentalize people, and they also use useful idiots, like, not that I'm saying Chris Martin was a useful idiot, but doesn't know, and it's like a Reno 911, and they mix reality with fiction, and then they allow for whatever to happen, and there you have it. So it's like, did George Floyd, did it go wrong, or did it go right? Because they wanted, it is a Rodney 2.0. It's the $2 billion in damage. The last event that caused that much damage was Rodney King.
So for people listening, are you looking to do more interviews on this?
Yes.
Okay. So
Yes.
for people listening, if you're a podcaster, reach out to Maryam, and then I'll also have you let the listeners know what's the best way of reaching out. And then also your book and documentary. Do you need any help with that, or is there anything you want to throw out there in regards to possible people who can help?
I want to say, first off, thank you for going down this rabbit hole with me. And I trust that as we get into the details, it becomes a little bit more interesting when you see all the holes. And that I directed Vanishing of the Bees. And as I said earlier, I raised $1 million, and I'm having troubles raising $15,000. And part of it is to go to the editor, and the other is to cover my costs. I'm not looking to make money off of George Floyd. And so I do have a Give, Send, Go link that I can share with you. I may have shared with you. I also have GeorgeFloydReview.org, and I have lots more exhibits and fresh information to share. I have a publisher, and I really would ask, please support a real journalist. And I've spent so much time doing this because I like doing things properly, not half-assed. And that really requires looking under every nook and cranny. For me, it's seeing everything I possibly can to be thorough. And I still have some more interviews to do. So yeah, please do support real journalism.
Yeah, give me any links. Send me any links that you want in the show description.
Yeah.
And also, so if there is a podcast or a YouTuber creator that wants to connect with you, what's the best way of contacting you? On your website or on?
Please, I'll give my email if that's okay. Maryam, is that all right to give it?
That's your call. I mean, I don't know.
Maryam, Maryam at Honey Colony, HoneyColony.com. For people who are not familiar with my work, I'm a real journalist. I directed the film Vanishing of the Bees. I'm also a certified functional medicine coach and consultant. I reversed lupus. I like to tell people, a lot of people don't like to reveal their age. I'm 49 years old. And I've reversed lupus. I've learned literally how to walk again after being hit by an SUV and dragged 50 feet.
Wait, time out. You're 49 years old?
Yeah.
What?
Yeah, I'm 49.
All this time I thought we were like close in age.
How old are you, Ricky?
I'm turning 37.
Oh my goodness. My biological age, because I work with Viome, which is a gut intelligence test. So my biological age, according to that test, is 38. And so that's another reason why they want to censor me, because I can say I reverse lupus. I walk my talk. I'm a very proud food Nazi. And I treat my body as a temple. And I'm all about optimizing our biology, not eradicating the immune system. And so learning how to walk again, spending 6 years to reverse a horrible autoimmune condition and being in chronic pain, that I stand and show you what is possible, and you can improve your situation, whatever it is. And it starts with our food. Food is sacred. So when you learn that the food supply is poisoned, I don't know why the hell you'd ever trust what's in that jab.
And I'm sure you've been a huge influence on Zach's outlook on that topic. We went down that rabbit hole yesterday, and knowing that you guys are good friends, I'm sure Maryam had a lot of influence on some of his opinions on food and
Absolutely. Now that I'm not there, I know the little things that he does. So yeah, I am a good influence. But that's one of the things we connected over was he's a geek over health and wellness. And when I approached him, because I'm the one who found out Google's a drug company and told him, I was surprised that he knew so much about health and wellness. So we geeked over that as well. Because I mean, he's a scientist. I'm not a scientist. So yeah, yes, definitely I have a good influence on anyone who's around me because I'm very self-disciplined and the reason why I refuse to let these big corporations poison me. F them.
You're absolutely right. And health and nutrition's that's I always say it. I said it with Zach. I'll say it today. I mean, it's some of the most important information people can discover because it can change your life and it can give you more energy. It can change your mood. It can make you a better brother, sister, parent, husband, wife,
Yes.
whatever it may be, give you the motivation, desire to pursue whatever you want to pursue. I mean, if you don't have health, you don't have anything. So it's definitely super important. And you've done some amazing work throughout the years in regards to that topic. So definitely check out your website.
Yeah, Honey Colony. Please buzz on over to honeycolony.com and also simplytransformative.com just to share that I was one of the first to sell CBD before everyone and their mother, and that the day of the deadly insurrection, they knocked down my processor, and for 5 months I couldn't make any funds, and I used to make $75,000 a month on Simply Transformative, and the entire year I made $28,000 because of the censorship. And there's a lot of trash out there, but you need to look at the entourage effect, look at organics, look at the cannabinoid system, and take something that's liposomal. And you can use Beelady, BEELADY, to get 15% off and support products made in America.
Awesome. Yeah, without a doubt. I mean, I think anybody who's been listening to this show for a while or the Union of Unwanted, they know you're a sincere person who truly is passionate about health and nutrition, and you would never sell anything that wasn't, the best. So that's when you know who's selling you the stuff, you're much more confident in what their motives are. So, but thank you so much, Miriam.
Thank you. Thank you, Ricky.
Yeah, and thanks for going down this rabbit hole. And because I think that a lot of times these things don't become uncovered and discovered because people are too afraid of even having the discussion. And so if people can help, if anybody listening can help, please donate. It's not a topic that's really easy, like you said, to find help with. So help out, reach out, and all you guys don't email her looking for a date. I know she's very That's what I'm like, you might not want to. I mean, Roger Stone was hitting on you on that.
Yes, let's not forget Roger Stone. Roger Stone, I gave you my trailer to this psyop and didn't get back to me. So
it might be a topic that even Roger's like, I don't know if I want to touch that.
Right. Yeah, it's possible. Not just Logosophia is the name of the publisher because so many turned me down, and I'm an excellent journalist and writer and researcher. So it's going to be a very juicy book. So thank you, Logosophia, for having the courage to take this on. And if there's anyone who wants to exec produce the documentary, please contact me as well. I'm so grateful, Ricky. Thank you. I hope you learned a few things about George Floyd.
Oh, you sparked my interest, but a lot, and so it's fascinating. I mean, the thing is, I knew there was inconsistencies, but just you discussing it's so obvious that you went far down this rabbit hole, and like you said, there's nothing that you haven't looked at, and all the names, all the places, all the footage, I mean, it's just so for you to come to a conclusion that it was a psyop. Obviously, it was well researched, and you didn't come to that conclusion lightly. You took your time to get there. So I think people can appreciate that, and I think hopefully it only fascinates people even more. So when the book does come out and the documentary does come out, people are gonna dive deep into it and realize like there's a lot more to that story than meets the eye. So.
Thank you. I really am grateful.
Right, we'll keep in touch, and
okay.
Hopefully we talk again in the near future.
Yes. God bless. Thank you.
Take care.
Thank you. Bye.